The optimal cadence while climbing, a topic I know is going to split the room. It's been debated so much, with proponents of cadence saying spin to win, and proponents of being out of the saddle saying, well, saying what? Maybe grind to find the podium? This debate can go back and forth depending on the style that recently wins. Think about Alberto Contador, who is famously out of the saddle. And then there's Chris Froome, who is almost always seated. But can we finally put this debate to bed? Let's dive into the pros and cons of each to find if your riding style is causing you to waste watts on those big Zwift climbs. What is grinding while on a bike? The simplest explanation is when you're out of your saddle and riding at a low RPM. And proponents of it certainly have some data in their corner, as riding out of the saddle changes your body angles, allowing for higher torque. One key angle is at the hip, which opens up and allows you to activate more muscles. In addition, you will have greater leverage on the handlebars. And this is why greater power can be produced, especially in short bursts. Logically, it makes sense. Think about the last bit of a climb where you're just trying to maintain contact. Are you in or out of the saddle? I am always out of it, trying to produce as many watts as possible. So we know higher power is possible out of the saddle, but are there other benefits? Yes, research has shown that when you're riding at higher than 94% of your VO2 max, or at gradients above 10%, this method may be more efficient. Although riding out of the saddle typically results in an increased heart rate, studies have shown this difference disappears when the road kicks above 10% and the perceived exertion is lower, and the same may be true for all-out efforts. This may explain why your body naturally wants to get out of the saddle when tackling those steep walls. The final pro is, if you are a lighter rider, this style may have more of a benefit to you, as lighter riders are shown to be capable of physiologically remaining out of the saddle longer compared to heavier ones. This may partially explain why Alberto Contador, riding at 62 kilograms, was out of the saddle more than Chris Froome, riding at 68 kilograms. But what are the downsides? Well, luckily for this style, one of the largest is removed by Zwift, because it does not account for your in real life position on the bike, and no aero penalty is applied. The first downside is that most tests report riders out of the saddle having an increased heart rate. This can vary based on individual, but overall, the heart workload increases. Another downside is that it utilizes more muscles, and the position fatigues muscles quicker. Because muscles require glucose, you burn more in this position. As your cardio system can recover quicker than the glucose can be restored, you may be left with less energy later on in the race. Simply put, you may run out of matches or the capability to produce explosive power at the finish line. Spinning equals winning. Spinning while on climbs is typically associated with being in the saddle. So what are the benefits of climbing primarily in this position? First, the seated position will allow for more improved cycling economics, while at shallower road gradients. Studies show that climbing a 4% road while seated requires 10% less oxygen compared to the standing position. Additionally, it allows you to ride with a lower heart rate. The longer you can avoid the red zone, the better. If you're tackling the dreaded Alp to Zwift, it may be advised to keep your heart rate under control as long as possible in order to avoid cracking. Additionally, spinning allows for smoother pedal strokes, as you can find a rhythm and continue turning those pedals consistently. In contrast, being out of the saddle emphasizes a downward stroke of the pedal more, and it can be harder to find a rhythm. And finally, it will allow you to save the muscles needed for explosive efforts at the finish banner, or when you really need the power to explode through a short climb later on. However, spinning does come with downsides. The biggest is that you will not be able to produce peak power in this position. How many times have you completed an all-out effort up the Yorkshire KOM or up the pace to remain with the lead group on steep road gradients while in the seated position? Probably not often. Attempting to do so while seated would likely result in you being dropped. Another downside is it may be hard to produce the required power when the road kicks. How many times have you been seated and the gradient reaches 15%? If you attempt to stay seated, you may find it taxing your body to keep those pedals spinning. So there's obviously benefits to both. But based on the science, there are some key takeaways. First, if you are near a VO2 max effort or on steep bits, being out of the saddle may be required. Second, on longer, steady climbs, you will be more efficient by remaining in the saddle. It will keep your heart rate under control and delay entering the red zone. And third, there is rider variability. Lighter riders may benefit more from being out of the saddle, and each person's preference will make a large impact. While the research before showed heart rates are lower in the seated position, some riders had almost no change in heart rate, likely because their body may have been more used to being out of the saddle. So which side wins this debate? Let me know in the comments section below. But from the research, I believe the optimal riding position is, well, whatever you prefer. Maybe that's a big letdown, as you were hoping your style won and wanted to prove your mates wrong. But the data truly says that it comes down to personal preferences. Although you may prefer one style, I do believe it is important to mix in between each position. I find comfort in changing positions to alleviate some pressures while in the saddle or back soreness while standing. Hopefully, with that, this timeless debate has been put to rest.